Don't wait until it's too late, because we will shut down the roads when the winds are too high to safely navigate through the county. This is early afternoon. You need to finish securing your homes. You need to make sure you're packed for a couple of days. This storm has picked up a little bit of forward motion, but it is still moving slowly. We can expect hurricane and/or tropical storm conditions for at least 36 hours. It is not going to pass through our area quickly, and it's going to drop a tremendous amount of rain. It's going to
We have meteorologist Dave Warren in with us with our next weather forecast. Lots of stuff brewing out there in the Atlantic, though.
And this will be the main concern here over the next few days. We are watching, we are waiting, we're seeing how it develops. And as it continues to move west at 13 miles an hour, still just a tropical wave. But over the next 5 days, conditions should be a little more favorable. A lot of information coming in. Computer forecasts continue to show good agreement that it moves west. Now, the timing will be over the weekend. We'll see how it develops, where it develops, because the tracks then start to spread out a bit. So a little uncertain here, but likely over the weekend to next week as it moves to the northwest. We'll watch this one closely here because conditions will be a bit more favorable. Two computer forecast models showing that spread now. This is the scenarios that we have setting up. They'll have a good idea once it develops and continues to move northwest. This would be the situation there early next week. The situation in the next 24 hours, it's around Bermuda. This is Hurricane Fiona. Major hurricane continuing to race off to the north. Looks like it's staying west of Bermuda, then into eastern Canada by Saturday and Sunday as it really accelerates there to the north. Tropical storm Gaston in the North Atlantic. Two other areas with low to medium development potentials, but way out in the East Atlantic.
Always alerting, always tracking. This is Next Weather.
This Thursday morning, it is extremely active in the tropics. Hurricane Fiona, a major hurricane, headed in the general direction of Bermuda and then could be headed towards Nova Scotia. Tropical storm Gaston out in the northern Atlantic. A few areas that we'll watch in the eastern Atlantic, but we'll be closely monitoring this disturbance in the eastern Caribbean, which is bringing heavy rain and gusty winds to Trinidad, Tobago, as well as Venezuela. And it is forecast to move generally to the west-northwest. The models are in agreement as we head throughout the weekend that this will be happening and that it could likely stay to the south of Puerto Rico, Hispaniola. But as we head into late Sunday, Monday, it looks like it will start to lift more northward. Could be passing near over parts of Jamaica or Cuba. It's really too soon to say, because as we get into the middle and end of next week, notice how the models diverge. They spread out, indicating that there's still a lot of uncertainty here as to where it will go. And you can see that indicated in our U.S. model, indicated by the red, Euro models, the blue. The models are in agreement, at least through the weekend, that it'll move west-northwest and lift north. However, what happens as we head into early next week? The models have been flip-flopping every day, something different. So this is the reason why, until we see that area develop, we really can't pin down where this could be headed. But as for now, the Euro model takes it possibly in our general direction, whereas the GFS U.S. model takes it more towards the west and possibly towards the Yucatan.
Alerting, always tracking. This is Next Weather.
All right, everybody, let's get you ready for Thursday here. Next Radar Network, quiet now for the most part. Still tracking a few showers and storms basically west of the metros here, but these were from gust fronts earlier from the thunderstorms that blew up earlier this afternoon. Really didn't bother us much for the evening commute. Got another cell rolling through. Isla Morada got hit with heavy rainfall for today, Cudjoe Key, and that could make its way a little bit further to the west before everything's kind of sinking down here from the earlier storms that were popping up through the afternoon. But the next 3 hours, again, things things winding down, and then we'll set up, I think, for another round of showers and storms tomorrow. Coverage will begin to lessen, but I think really Friday is going to be the driest of the next several days, because this front is going to continue sinking south, and as it does so for the weekend, it'll bring us back some tropical moisture here, so we'll be able to, not just fire thunderstorms, but some of the ones that develop will be capable of producing that heavy rain that we've been seeing of late. So let's go through the next 2 days, and you'll see again showers and storms beginning to develop at 2 o'clock there right along the coast. Everything will continue to kind of then migrate to the south. Pretty much a repeat of today. I just think the coverage will begin to lessen here. And then for Friday, look at this, not much action through the afternoon before we get into Saturday, and then the storms return for us by then. All right, a lot in the tropics. I mean, this now looks right like the peak of hurricane season. We got a lot of systems here. We'll ignore basically all of them. Of course, if you have interest in Bermuda, Hurricane Fiona is going to be headed in that direction. It's a Cat 4 still, but this is the area we're going to be watching because it has a high percentage of development. This will develop into a tropical depression. I don't think there's a question about that. In fact, hurricane hunters have been in there tonight. We'll see what data they come back and punch into the model so we can get a better handle on it. But these are the forecast models available to us now, and you can see, pretty good agreement. This is going to start climbing latitude. It's going to move to the west and then northwest, and then as typical, the models start disagreeing. And boy, by the time we get into this is next Wednesday now, a huge range of possibilities here. So that's why we're not going to, lock in on anything. This could go north and east, north and west. So just keep checking back with us, and we'll be able to fine tune that. 2 of the models we look at, well, they're in great agreement at the beginning, and then basically as they head towards the Western Caribbean, same system, right? Just this is the American model, that is a European model, and they have completely different ideas about what this thing is going to do. They had a different idea yesterday, and we'll see what happens for tomorrow before things begin to coalesce into one solution here. So rain chances still about 50 to 60% for tomorrow. 7-day forecast will take us through that drying trend as we hit into Friday. Only 20% coverage, and then back into the action for the weekend. We'll be right back.
We are tracking the tropics tonight with several systems in the Atlantic, but one we're keeping a close eye on tonight.
Yeah, we are also monitoring our next weather radar network for showers and storms here this evening. So let's get the Chief Meteorologist and Hurricane Specialist Ivan Cabrera. First, Ivan, tell us about this tropical wave in the Caribbean.
Yeah, so we'll be talking about this a lot over the next few days. And as we talked about yesterday, there's a system here that we have to pay close attention to, guys. And of course, we'll get to our storms here. Here is all the action across the tropics. Fiona continuing Cat 4 to the north and east. We don't have to worry about Fiona. Then we have another disturbance across the eastern Atlantic. That we don't have to worry about. Gaston going to the north and east. It's this feature here that we're going to pay close attention to over the next few days. It continues to have about as high chance of development as you get, right? 90% for the National Hurricane Center. This is going to develop into a tropical depression. If it becomes a tropical storm, the name will be Hermine, and you'll be hearing that name, I think, a lot over the next few days. We'll talk about the forecast models here, as usual, in good agreement right towards the beginning, and then they begin to split off here. So we're looking at 2 potential tracks as it develops here in the Caribbean, perhaps going further north and west, perhaps turning more to the north. It is so early here that I am not going to give you a precise forecast on where this developing system, that by the way hasn't developed yet, is going to head. There are the 2 global models that we look at that go out 10 days out. We'll look at the clock here now. We're talking about Sunday. We have a disturbance here that potentially by then is a tropical storm or something stronger, and I'll stop it here because I tell you, the models keep changing their minds as far as what this is going to do. Is it going to go into the Gulf and head west? Is it going to go north, or is it going to curve and then threaten South Florida heading into the latter part of next week? Too early to say. And again, once we have this disturbance that develops and we have an actual point, I think the models will do a better job of telling us where this is headed, but something we'll be paying close attention, obviously, over the next few days. Showers and storms fired early today, right? Downpours here that continue moving north to south. The sea breeze got going, but then everything has just slid across the coast. That is now pushing out towards the waters here, so we're looking much better where we had some tropical downpours earlier this afternoon. And there you see the upper Keys getting pounded with some torrential rain and frequent lightning, and then a good band moving through Isla Morada right now, and that is going to continue, I think, for the next hour or so, but then things will begin to wind down as the storms basically push off to the west, and our diminishing rain chances will continue as we head into the evening.
tracking 2 tropical waves with a small chance of development in the Atlantic, marking the expected uptick in activity as we near historically the busiest month of hurricane season. We have the latest models, a look back at Hurricane Andrew 30 years ago today, coming your way on Tracking the Tropics, powered by Handyman Roofing. Hey there, folks. JB here with you live on your Wednesday edition of Tracking the Tropics with Chief Meteorologist Jeff Baradelli, meteorologist Rebecca Barry, and our featured meteorologist today joining us from WCBD. It's Chief Meteorologist Rob Fowler, who's been on the program before. We'll pick Rob's brain in a second. We've got, of course, a look back at Hurricane Andrew coming your way. But first, let's send things over to the wall with Max Defender 8, Chief Meteorologist Jeff Baradelli. And Jeff, we've got a look here at live satellite, and we're tracking 2 systems here in the Atlantic.
We're tracking 2 wannabe systems. We'll see if they actually become real bona fide depressions, tropical storms, or maybe even eventually hurricanes. But it's been so quiet this season, and these systems have had to overcome a lot to try to develop, and they have not been able to do so successfully so far. But let's show you the 2 areas that we're watching. This is the one I'm most concerned about. It is right there. But there's also a lot of activity now exiting Africa, moving towards the Cape Verde Islands. So let's show you the National Hurricane Center outlook. Now, this disturbance, which is to the east of Barbados, you can see it right there, has a 20% chance of development in the next 5 days. That's important. We don't expect it to develop in the next couple of days. It's going to take a few days. In fact, likely it won't develop, if it does develop at all, until it gets pretty close to the Yucatan. And then further east, we showed you this briefly before, but now we're closer in. You can see this big disturbance. And there have been some very robust waves moving off Africa. We have a very favorable pattern for this right now in Africa. The problem is it's not very favorable in the Atlantic for these to intensify and develop. It's not a problem for us. It's good for us, right? There's a lot of dry and dusty air to the north of these disturbances, so they've had to battle through that. Now, over the past month, they haven't been able to. The computer models do show over the next week or 2 that 1 or 2 of these should be able to overcome the dry and dusty air and develop. Now, this disturbance, which is to the east of Barbados, not organized at all right now, but it's not surrounded by an envelope of dry air as the system's moving off Africa. So this has a better chance of developing, but it's going to take time, and one of the reasons it's going to take time is wind shear. Wherever you see the yellow, the orange, and especially the red, that's where it is unfavorable for development. And there's a lot this year, a lot of wind shear across the Atlantic basin. That's one of the other reasons why things haven't been developing. Now, do notice this X right here, just to its north, there's a lot of wind shear, but by the time it gets right here, and it doesn't happen until the middle of next week, but once it does get into the Yucatan Channel area, on the west side of Cuba, maybe just to the east of Yucatan, there is a window of opportunity with very low shear for this to develop. The question is, does it move quickly into the Yucatan before it has a chance to develop, or does it go just north? And that is going to determine whether or not this develops. So this is our European computer model. Follow the X across the Caribbean. Again, conditions across the Caribbean, somewhat favorable, but not favorable enough until it gets here. Now, the European model's pushing it right across the Yucatan, although you can clearly see there's a big bend here, which means that there is some organization happening towards the end of this period. Now, I'll show you the GFS model, which is the American model, and you can see that this is clearly better defined. And the computer models, there are more than just these 2, are showing some kind of hybrid in between these 2. It's either going to be a storm that forms, but probably it's going to wait a while for it to form, or it's just going to move into the Yucatan and not form at all. But there is a chance, and obviously anything that comes this close to the Gulf of Mexico is something that we want to watch very closely. All right, so with that said, I think this is the part where I want to bring Rebecca in, I want to bring Robin, I want to bring JB back in, and we'll talk about what's been happening so far and what's also been stopping this season from being more productive. You can clearly see it has not been very productive.
Guys, we're also going to be taking your questions out of the meteorologist Q&A section of the program. You know how it works. You can use hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyJeff, hashtag HeyRebecca. And also, let's bring back in, of course, our featured meteorologist, Chief Meteorologist Rob Fowler, joining us from WCBD. And Rob, you see it here on your screen. We're talking about a relatively quiet season so far.
Yeah, actually, JB, I always use 1992, of course, the 30th anniversary of Andrew, as a benchmark, because we know that was a very quiet year. The first storm was the A storm making landfall 30 years ago in South Florida. So just because it's been quiet so far, we just don't know what's going to happen the rest of the year. We have a good feel, and the forecaster is still for a busy year. So at this point, we have to kind of hang our hats on that. But here in Charleston, our benchmark storm was Hurricane Hugo coming up on 33 years ago. And I'm always reminding our viewers that Hugo did not come off the continent of Africa as a wave, and you saw Jeff talk about those waves in Africa, until September 9th. So it was later than this point at this in time that we actually saw that wave that eventually 12 days later would become a major hurricane that hit landfall here in the South Carolina coast. And coming up on 33 years, it's the last major hurricane to make landfall here along our coast. So September 9th is a date I always look at as one that reminds me that just because it's been quiet right now doesn't mean that something's not going to happen that could impact you down the road tomorrow, the next day, or next week.
It's been, of course, a hurricane season unlike recent years. We're used to being a little bit deeper in the alphabet into August, but so far we're, of course, still in the ABCs, if you will. I want to get to our featured questions in the meteorologist Q&A section. We're going to be talking about Andrew here in just a second. I would just like to get some comments going out of the Facebook Live comment section. So for those of you new to the program, you know how it works. Use a hashtag Ask a Question. Tim Skull from WFLA's Facebook page, hashtag KJB. How are things looking? I'm going to send this over to Rebecca. How are things looking for the East Coast through September 3rd?
Well, we are, of course, watching those systems that Jeff was just showing you. But as of right now, it doesn't look like anything's certainly going to make its way towards the East Coast in between now and September 3rd. And so long-term forecast models are, of course, just a big question mark most of the time. However, this is the time of the year that we do start to see an uptick in activity along the East Coast. In fact, that's the more likely areas of development for the month, is that those systems develop near the Lesser Antilles and then swing up towards the East Coast, Florida, the Carolinas, Georgia. And so this is the time of the year that, unfortunately, we do worry about storms heading that way. But as of right now, in between now and September 3rd, we're just looking for the potential for that wave to develop off the coastline of Africa. And both of those situations, no matter which forecast model you look at, push it into the Gulf and not the East Coast.
Yeah, and we also have a chance, of course, with this next question to talk a little bit about tropics education. I'll throw this one Jeff's way and Rob's way as well. Dan Evans from the WFLA Facebook page asking hashtag, hey, Jeff, any chance of these two waves combining into one huge storm?
What was that movie that came out last year? It was a movie about, I don't
remember, but I know this question has come up in the past about whether or not storms can mix into one superstorm.
Not these kind of storms. Tropical storms have rising air in the middle, and then they have sinking air on the outskirts. So when two storms approach each other, the sinking air on the outskirts of both storms usually crushes one of the storms. So fortunately for us, we cannot get one of those monster storms. But Rob knows as well as us that when you're not in the tropics, storms can combine. In fact, the perfect storm is a perfect example of that. And Sandy was a decent example of that, because when Sandy moved on shore and became extratropical, it merged with a front or an upper level storm, right?
Absolutely. And I'm always reminded, and I go back to Hugo because that's kind of our benchmark, but there was another storm called Iris that was kind of following Hugo. And a lot of people are asking, Rob, could Iris combine with Hugo? And what happened was, and Jeff, you just mentioned this, even the outflow from Hugo kind of tore apart and sheared the smaller storm Iris, kind of like the big brother and little sister. The big brother doesn't want the little sister to be hanging around, so kind of pushes away. And so that's what happened back in 1989. But there were two storms, Hugo and Iris, following each other, basically. And it was a question that was asked quite often. Could they join together in terms of a big superstorm?
So, JB, let me ask you, do you mind if I show folks this graphic here? Just want to kind of describe what's been happening this year so far?
Yeah, let's do it, because we do have a question from Ashley Renee Knight from WMBB's Facebook page on the Panhandle, and this leads into what you're talking about, Jeff. Hashtag KGB, what's the difference on count of hurricanes, but from 2018 to 2020? And of course, right now we're sitting on a big fat 0 for hurricanes so far this year.
I don't know the number of hurricanes in 2020, although there were 30 named storms, which was the most we've ever had, actually. But, let's talk about this year. So we've had 3 named storms, no hurricanes. I mean, they were barely named storms. And one of the things that's happening here, and I don't think any of the experts really understand exactly why it's happening, but so the position of high pressure is part of the reason. There's also a lot of cool water in the western part of the Atlantic Ocean. I'm going to go forwards just to show you this. Excuse me, in the eastern part of the Atlantic Ocean. that setup is definitely bringing dry air south. Europe is in a drought right now. There's a lot of cool water upwelling. There's been these strong winds across the Atlantic Ocean. And that seems to all be combining for a very unfavorable pattern in the Atlantic. So it's not just dust coming from Africa. It's also dry air that's coming from the mid-latitudes. It's being entrained south by that high that you see. But whatever is causing this European drought, of course, the European drought is over the course of not just this year, years and years it's been building up, but the lack of rainfall there too. The whole pattern just seems to be unfavorable in the mid-latitudes. We're seeing what we call wave breaking happen. So essentially these storms, which normally would just flow from west to east in the jet stream and just pass by, they're breaking off. These pieces of storms are breaking off, causing all this wind shear across the Atlantic Ocean. So it's just a lot of things that are combining for what is a really slow season. So to show you again, by this time in 2020, we had 13 named storms. 2021, we had 8, and this year we only have 3, and they're all weak storms. Rob, do you want to chime in on this pattern in the Eastern Atlantic? What do you make of it? Because even people like Phil Klotzbach, from Colorado State University, everybody's like, this is weird, but we don't have an exact explanation for what's happening.
Yeah, I scoured, knowing I was going to be on the program today, scoured Twitter, looked at every account I could possibly look at and get some insight into what everybody is thinking. And I think you hit it on the head, Jeff, that people are kind of shaking their heads, but nobody's complaining because for every day that there's nothing tropical going on, to me, is a good day because we've lived through that. But I just recently had a chance to go down the Rhine River and on a trip, and that's what everybody's talking about, the lack of rainfall in the Danube and the Rhine. They have to, pump the water levels up to be able to get those river ships, river boats down the river. So that is a big topic in Europe, the lack of rainfall, the drought situation, how it's impacting not just what's going on in Europe, but as you mentioned, what's happening in the tropical system as well. Of course, the Saharan air layer has really come into play also. So we like that. Let it last a little bit longer, just to the north of where those waves are right now. But I'm okay with the lack of storms. But we all know, and 1992 was a good example. It was a year we had 7 total storms, which was below average. But we know that one of them is one of 4 Category 5 hurricanes to ever make landfall here in the United States. So all it takes is one, and we know the season has a lot more yet to go. Where the peak, not even there yet.
I didn't want to leave Ashley hanging on this question. What was the difference on count of hurricanes from 2018 to 2020? So here are the numbers. Get this. So 2018, 8 hurricanes. 2019, 6. And then 2020, which was the record-breaking year, a whopping 14 hurricanes that year. As a reminder, we are in August, and this is what we like, sitting on that 0 on the hurricane count. We're only through Alex, Bonnie, and Colin so far on the list. I want to talk about Hurricane Andrew. I want to talk about, of course, the 30-year anniversary falling today. I want to get to just 1 or 2 more questions while we have, of course, our viewers joining us here and submitting questions using our hashtag system. You can use a hashtag with any one of our names. Sue Collins from Wavy's Facebook page in Virginia, hashtag HJB. Will the Gulf get any storms soon? I'm in Texas. That's the Western Gulf, Rebecca.
Normally that peaks a little earlier in the system, but I think with the slow start, what we're going to see is, just like the systems that we just looked at, it is most likely going to end up impacting the Texas coastline. I'm thinking of this season more like 2018 and 2019. When we got that previous question, I looked up, we were only on the E names in both of those 2018 and 2019 systems, but this time in those years. And so a little bit of a slow start is actually normal for us. We've just been running so above average and so hot the last couple of seasons that it feels very slow. But I do think the Texas coastline is probably due for a couple of storms within the early parts of this season.
We shall, of course, be keeping a very close eye on the Gulf. We've got 2 more questions before we talk about Andrew. CJ Bridges from the WFLA Facebook page, hashtag HJB. How do you feel about that wave in the Caribbean? I feel like I want it to stay away, Jeff. that's how I feel about it. I don't want it coming our way.
So yesterday, the American model had blew it up into a strong hurricane, like 100 miles to the west of Tampa. The reason why we never show you these hurricane models is because, one model will do one thing and 6 hours later, that same model will do something completely different. So you very rarely ever see us show you the computer models that are like 5 to 10 days out because they're never accurate. But I will tell you the American model did have a Category 3 hurricane 100 miles to the west of Tampa due to this disturbance that was moving through the Caribbean. Now it doesn't have it at all. or barely develops it. Actually, Rebecca's about to show you. So there is the European model over the Yucatan, and then advance it one more time, Rebecca. That's now what the American model shows. That would be a tropical depression at best, maybe a weak tropical storm, as opposed to yesterday where it had it further north at the same time frame, actually a little earlier, and as a Cat 3 hurricane. Point is, the models aren't very good past about 5 days specifically, which is why we don't show you them. But the bottom line is it will be something near the Gulf of Mexico by the middle and end of next week, so it's something we need to watch closely.
And then I love this question. It didn't have a hashtag for one of us, but I thought it was kind of humorous. Ray Roberts from the WFLA Facebook page, hashtag ask question in all capital letters. How long can a hurricane sit stationary? And the answer to this, I know from a vague perspective, is an inconveniently long amount of time, because if a hurricane sits over one section, especially over a community, we're talking
like
about
Matthew.
dumping. Right.
Well,
Matthew comes to mind.
And Dorian over the Bahamas for 5 days.
A
So
disaster.
So,
Yeah.
But
they
scientifically,
But they weaken eventually because they upwell all that cold water. So once they use up the surface water, the warm water, then they start to upwell cool water underneath it, which is why the amount of heat that you have below the surface is really, really important. So the loop current in the Gulf of Mexico, right? The warm water is so deep in the loop current that you can't possibly eat all of that away. So a storm could actually stall over the loop current and probably not weaken very much over the course of many days, just because it's not just surface warm water, it's very deep warm water. So, that affects it too. But yeah, so a storm could stay there forever, but it will eventually just keep weakening and weakening.
let's pivot now to talking about Hurricane Andrew. 30 years ago today, making landfall in South Florida. And just really quickly, I know that we're going to show some statistics here and show you a little bit more about the science of the storm. Just take a look. This will provide, oh, that's the wrong video. This is the right video. This will provide some perspective for our audience. Going back again, this is some video from South Florida 30 years ago. Just take a look at some of the sheer carnage that was caused in the southern end of the peninsula, all a result of the Cat 5 storm. Did it downgrade to Cat 4 as it made landfall, or it hit Florida as a Cat 5? Because I know it reemerged in the Gulf afterwards as a Cat 4 as it made its way towards New Orleans.
It was strengthening as it came on shore. So it had every bit of its winds when it hit Homestead, Cutler Bay, Kendall, South Miami area.
I mean, we're talking
and if
about,
I remember correctly, guys, I think Andrew was not upgraded to a 5 until about 10 years later on the 10th anniversary when they went back and looked at the data. So I think officially when it came on shore, it was a 4 that eventually they realized was not a 4, it was a 5.
Yep.
And people went to bed that night and it wasn't that strong of a storm. It was really the first modern example of rapid intensification and how much we needed to pay attention to the depth of the water, those sea surface temperatures, and the factors in that lead into rapid intensification, and why it's so important, because a lot of Floridians who are storm weary and sometimes a little stubborn about evacuating went to bed thinking this was not as big of a deal as it was going to be, and then woke up to a Cat 5.
as far as modern storm tracking, that was the wake-up call hurricane, was it not?
Changed everything. Yeah, not only was it the wake-up call hurricane, but it changed all the building codes in Florida. I mean, people still talk to this. If you go, I've worked in Miami for many years. If you talk to people there, they talk about their lives as before Andrew and after Andrew. You know, it's that kind of pivotal moment in their lives and in their existence, and it really did change the way that we all heed warnings and precautions from hurricanes.
And before, Jeff, I know that you have more to explain about Hurricane Andrew and, of course, the significance of today being 30 years later. Really quickly, I just want to let our commenters know, if you have a story about Andrew, if you have any memory of Andrew, something that you'd like to share with us, we'll look for your hashtag. You see them on the black stripes all around your screen, hashtag AJB, Rob, Rebecca, and Jeff. If you have a story to share with us, we'll look for them starting now in the Facebook Live comment section, something to share about Hurricane Andrew. But Jeff, yeah, I mean, we're talking about an absolutely, a monster of a storm.
Yeah, so this is about as strong as it gets. This had winds of 165 miles an hour. You heard Rob mention that when it was coming, I'm sure they did not know the winds were that strong. They went back and they upgraded it to a Cat 5 many years after. But what I find most interesting is you notice the donut shape. You notice where the eye wall is. That's the deep red that you see. Notice that Miami was not in that. Fort Lauderdale especially was not in that. So you really had to be anywhere from Coconut Grove and Coral Gables south to Homestead and the northern part of Key Largo, which is Ocean Reef, to really experience the full force of a Cat 5. And I have so many people tell me, including my wife, I always call her out. Sorry, honey. She was in Fort Lauderdale at the time, and she swears up and down, I went through one of the worst storms ever in Andrews, so I don't need to evacuate. No, you didn't go through one of the worst storms ever because you were in Fort Lauderdale, and the core of Hurricane Andrew was south of not just Fort Lauderdale, but south of Miami. So people have a skewed view about, their experiences oftentimes with hurricanes. A lot of people think, I've asked people in hurricane rooms, when you go out and do hurricane talks, how many of you think that you've been through a major hurricane? And everybody raises their hands. Well, come to realize there have only been about 4 major hurricane strikes, Cat 3, Cat 4, Cat 5s in the state of Florida in decades. So most folks will take their hand down when they realize that they were on the outskirts of one of those hurricanes, or it was just a Cat 1 or 2 when it came across. It wasn't nearly as strong. So I think that's an important lesson, that most of us think we've been through the big one, and very few have been through the big one.
And Jeff, that's always a good point when we talk here, because we had the same situation with Hugo. Hugo was a Category 4, but it was only for a small part of our area, really a more unpopulated part of the Charleston area. If you're familiar, we have a big forest called the Francis Marion National Forest, and that's what got the worst winds, the highest storm surge. But if the eye of the storm had come in about 20, 30 miles south across maybe Edisto Beach, then that would have drawn the strongest winds, the highest storm surge into the major population center. So we always try to preach every storm has its own identity. You can't compare and say, I went through this, so I can easily weather the next storm, because each one will be different. Where it makes landfall, what time it makes landfall, the tide situation when it does, all come into play in terms of what impacts you may have to deal with.
You saw there that comment as well from Patricia, right on cue. Rob, you were mentioning Hugo, one of our commenters mentioning Hugo. Gail with this comment, #AJB, I lived in Gainesville then, and Andrew knocked our power out. Gainesville typically is where a lot of people evacuate to. Gainesville, far away.
Yeah.
I mean, Rebecca, we're talking about, everyone
Hundreds
talks
of
about
miles.
South Florida,
Yeah.
but we're talking about Gail being in Gainesville at the time and feeling the impacts from this storm.
And a lot of time our inland areas get those tornadoes from the system. Charlie went across the state and wreaked a lot of havoc across interior portions of the state. Irma was the same way, where we saw a significant impact over inland areas as well, miles and miles away from what is the true strongest wind impact of the storm. Then you have the after effects, whether it's flooding from rainfall as the system starts to fall apart. The Carolinas sees that a lot when the systems start to fall apart and move inland, and we see the flooding in the mountains there. And then we get the tornadoes as they cross the state oftentimes as well.
Rob, when we talk about the history books, where does Andrew fit in for you before I know we want to wrap up our conversation here as we get towards the end of this episode and Tracking the Tropics, but what comes to mind when you hear people talk about Hurricane Andrew?
Well, I'm getting goosebumps right now because Andrew was 3 years after Hugo. So for us, we'd still been punched in the gut even 3 years after. So when we saw Andrew coming, realizing what was going to happen to the folks in South Florida, I think everybody has empathy and sympathy, knowing what they've been through and what they're about to go through, our neighbors to the south. So I do remember feeling like, uh-oh, and then seeing the video and the pictures the next day, hearing the stories. Obviously, when you're impacted by a hurricane, there are so many good things that happen in terms of everybody gets together, everybody helps each other out. Well, having gone through Hugo in '89, I was so proud of our community for realizing we need to go help. So, multitude of trucks, the electric trucks, the Red Cross from Charleston headed down south, got there as soon as they could to help out. So my memories, obviously I knew it was going to be a big storm going down in history, but also the after impacts that the folks having to live without power for weeks and months. And basically, like Jeff said, now it's a timeline. Where were you before Andrew? Where were you after Andrew?
And we have a couple comments coming in, including from Cynthia here, saying that she remembers when Andrew hit. She said that she never wants to go through another hurricane again. And we've heard people say this so many times over and over and over again. And then Ernest Green Jr., we got so many comments. We can't display them all. So many comments from folks describing their memories of Andrew. Again, talking about 30 years ago today. Ernest Green Jr. from WFLA's Facebook page, #HeyJeff. I was living in South Miami Heights when Andrew hit in 1992. It was a devastating hurricane. Guys, any final thoughts on Andrew? We have one other question coming in from our Facebook Live comment section. Jeff, Rebecca, any final thoughts on Andrew?
Not necessarily. Just, the Tampa Bay area specifically is untested in the past 100 years. We have not had a major hurricane here, So Charlie hit to the south of us, and it did eventually move through as a slightly weakened hurricane through places like Polk County. But in terms of a direct hit on Tampa Bay, which would be a worst case scenario, we haven't had it. Even 101 years ago, that storm hit Tarpon Springs. It wasn't in what would be considered ground zero, because if it hits right around Tampa Bay, it pushes all that water into Tampa Bay. So it not only affects the coastal areas, but it really starts to impact Hillsborough County as well. So the point is a lot of our infrastructure is untested. Our people are completely untested unless they lived near Hurricane Michael when Hurricane Michael hit a couple of years ago. So the point is yeah, it would be devastating for many reasons.
Fingers crossed, of course, that we don't have an Andrew this year. We'll end out on this just as a recap for those who kind of joined midway through the episode. Julie Robertson from WMBB's Facebook page, #KJV. Can we hear about that storm headed into the Gulf? And what should we expect next weekend in the Panhandle? Let's just give a sort of a Gulf Coast all-around sort of forecast with these 2 tropical waves that we're tracking and whether or not there's going to be any impacts over the next 10 to 14 days.
It's conceivable, and I think this specific question about the Panhandle is probably related to yesterday's American model, which showed a hurricane moving to the west of Tampa, moving up towards the Panhandle. The American model does not show that anymore. It's much weaker. Nevertheless, what we see towards the end of next week, around the Friday timeframe, and I think this is going to go out to Friday, so we'll be able to see it. So that is Friday. So you can see that the European model is pretty far south and very weak, but advance it one more time, Rebecca, you'll see it'll jump up. And that's the American model, which is further north. And in that case, yeah, you'd see potentially some impact. But again, that's the strongest of our models right now. The trend has been further west, further south. But nevertheless, once it gets into the Yucatan area, the wind shear is very low, and we don't know what's going to happen after that. It could quickly fire up and become a stronger storm. So it's something we need to watch.
I have a couple other last minute comments coming in here that I'm going to try to sneak in. I just want to give as many people here a voice as possible, because Andrew is just such a, it brings up so many different emotions for so many different people. Richard Behrens III from WFLA's Facebook page, #KJB. I live north of Cutler Bay near 152nd Street. No one knows the howling of wind. It was crazy. And then Sheila is joining us, #JB. My son was a baby during Andrew. We evacuated to Lake Worth and still heard the winds an hour north. My baby is now a 30-year-old man.
It was good that she evacuated to Lake Worth.
Yeah,
for sure.
And
that
folks,
was a good decision.
Andrew, of course, has formed so much of tropics education in the years after it. Our meteorologists here on the program, of course, have learned so much in the aftermath of Hurricane Andrew. It is just such a storm, of course, that evokes so many emotions for people, but it, of course, had such an impact on the meteorological community. And we've talked about it in here, even in recent weeks and in recent months. We've talked about it with our meteorologists here at WFLA. I'm sure it's very similar for folks like Rob joining us again from our sister station WCBD. It's a big mission, what we do here at WFLA, at Tracking the Tropics, as part of Next Star Nation. We keep you educated, informed, aware as to the latest that's going on in the tropics. The more that you know ahead of time, the more that you can prepare to keep your family, of course, safe, and of course, be tight-knit with your community when these storms do form and approach the areas and neighborhoods in which we live. So Tracking the Tropics is live Wednesdays at 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Central, on whatever app, website, or social media platform that you're watching on right now. But that's not all we do. We also have additional episodes when storms form. It doesn't matter if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Doesn't matter if it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday. When there's something that you need to know about, we're here in your hurricane headquarters to keep you prepared and keep you, most of all, informed. So I'd like to thank all of our meteorologists, our featured meteorologists. Go give them a follow, folks, on social media. WCBD Chief Meteorologist Rob Fowler. Great to have Rob back on the program. Folks, we'll see you next time on Tracking the Tropics, powered by Handyman Roofing. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.
Mandatory evacuations have been ordered for everyone in zones A and B. Officials say if you haven't left by now, you are almost at a time. Not at a time, but almost at a time.
And Fox 13's Elizabeth Fry joins us live from outside the storm shelter at Braden River High School.
Liz, this is good news. The shelters down there are packed, meaning people are following the orders, so that's the good news.
Yeah, it's good news because it means people are definitely listening to what officials have to say. But if you haven't heeded those warnings just yet, it means that you need to get on it right now. Find a shelter that's open and heed these warnings before it's too dangerous to be out on the roads. Roughly about just under half, I would say, of the shelters here in Manatee County are now at full capacity. So those shelters have closed, leaving just about over 16 or so shelters open to people who still need places to go. Now, currently here in Manatee County, zones A and B are under mandatory evacuation, with Zone C recommended. Tens of thousands of residents heeded the warnings yesterday, with currently 9 of the county's emergency shelters completely at capacity, with folks who didn't want to take any chances. Now, at this time, the message to residents hasn't changed. If you're in an evacuation zone, you still need to get to higher ground and take advantage of one of the shelters that are still open, because at a certain point, it will be too dangerous to make a last-minute decision to evacuate. Now, Manatee County officials say they don't want the storm to bring any fatalities, and that's why they want folks to take these warnings seriously.
My goal and the goal of every person here over the next 48 hours is no fatalities. None.
We don't want people getting complacent. A lot of folks who've lived in this area a long time, they've seen storms come and go, and oh, you know, we were fine. You can't think that way because every storm is different.
And one of the main reasons why officials are asking residents to heed these warnings, that's because at a certain point, law enforcement will not be on the street anymore responding to emergency calls. They are putting their safety as a priority as well. That's why those mandatory evacuations were in place, asking residents to heed the warnings so that they can be safe as well. Because once it becomes too dangerous on the roadways, officers will not be responding. Now, like I said, half of them, roughly just under half, I should say, of the shelters here in Manatee County are now full, but we do have a list of all the shelters that are still open on our website, fox13news.com. At a certain point this morning, it is not going to be safe for you to evacuate your home and make it out to one of these shelters. So if you're watching this morning, if you're in between going back and forth, now is the time to leave your house, pack up, and come to one of these shelters. We have seen a few people trickle in the time we've been here this morning, so at least that's reassuring, Walter, that people are listening.
Yeah, that's for sure. I know it's further north, but Sheriff Galtieri of Pinellas County, he said you're on your own if you decide to write it out. So it's kind of the case across the board for sure. Elizabeth Fry, live for us this morning. We'll talk to you later on. Thanks.
And those who live in zones A and B in Sarasota County are also under mandatory evacuations, and that includes the barrier islands there. Storm surge, flooding, and tornadoes are all big concerns for Sarasota right now. And the emergency management director warns the area will experience power outages and flood damage from Hurricane Ian. The county's 311 Connect line is open for anyone with questions about the storm. And the government has issued several advisories hoping to prevent injuries and deaths during and after the storm. Hurricanes can threaten our safety in ways that many newer Floridians may not realize. Fox 13's Craig Patrick takes a look at some key points to help keep you and your loved ones safe.
As the state PSA shows, keep generators at least 20 feet outside your home. And when people lose AC and open doors and windows, make sure the generator exhaust is not drifting into one of those open doors or windows. Also, don't use generators in the rain and avoid touching any electrical device if it gets wet. Touching down power lines can also kill you. Stay away from them and report them. Also, avoid floodwater, which can have down power lines in them and in places maybe much deeper than you think, and have snakes and other wildlife in it, and be contaminated with a stew of chemicals, germs, and waste that can make you very sick. Now, when a hurricane strikes the coast, the storm surge statistically poses the greatest risk to our lives and property. When the wall of water pushes in, it can knock down walls and wash homes off their foundations. For perspective, here's what Hurricane Andrew did to neighborhoods in South Florida 30 years ago. And looking back at our coverage of Hurricane Katrina in 2005, here are a couple of examples of what we found after the surge pushed through the coast of Biloxi.
Multi-story windjammer condominiums, all fine from the 4th floors up. But look what happened to the first couple of floors. Brick homes completely washed away from the foundation into the home behind it. The home behind it for several blocks, then crushed.
And that was Craig Patrick reporting. Katrina's storm surge was 28 feet, and it only takes 6 inches of rushing water to knock you over. 2 feet of rushing water can carry away cars. Yeah, Mariah was filling us in on that yesterday.
28 feet was Katrina. Wow. All right, in the aftermath of a hurricane, power outages can prolong the misery, but utility companies are ready to respond to get the lights and AC back on as quickly as possible. And new technology that they're using should be a lot of help. Last night, the governor said power companies will have 30,000 linemen positioned across the peninsula to respond to power outages. He expects widespread outages at that. 7 million Floridians lost power after Irma 5 years ago, 2017, if you remember. Some folks were in the dark for weeks. Yesterday, we visited Duke Energy's control room. That's where they monitored the storm, watching for any outages, and if necessary, dispatch the nearest crews to restore power. Technicians here also have access to the grid. It can often restore power from behind their desks. Duke also uses something called self-healing technology. So when the power goes out, the grid knows exactly what to do.
Our power lines can actually reroute along a power outage, such as a tree that may have hit our line. That reduces the number of customers that are impacted and in some cases can reduce the outage time. So that kind of technology, that self-healing, automatically just reroutes itself without us having to intervene with even a dispatcher behind me.
Duke Energy says about half of Pinellas County is covered with that self-healing technology right now. And for problems that don't fix themselves, Duke says it has more than 10,000 line workers and other employees standing by to restore power. They also have some safety advice. If you have any flooding inside your home, turn off the power at the breaker box. Now, obviously, water and electricity don't mix. Man. I remember driving in Hurricane Irma after the eye moved through Lakeland. The photographer and I, we drove out to Polk County, and we drove on I-4 at like 10, 15 miles an hour, looking for power lines with a flashlight just to make sure that we weren't going to drive over live lines.
Yeah, leave it alone. Don't touch it.
Yeah,
don't move it. Still had the Bay Area already feeling the effects of Hurricane Ian.
Yeah, coming up after the break, we'll check in with Dave for the latest on this track. We'll be right back.
And back out to our X-Rad radar we go. We're going to continue to dip in and out of our Fox 13 Tampa coverage as the morning progresses. We do have an update from the National Hurricane Center on the location of this storm. It is still a Category 3 storm with winds at 120 miles per hour. But as per the last update from the National Hurricane Center that came down in the 4 o'clock hour, the storm, Hurricane Ian, is 85 miles west-southwest of Naples, Florida. So you are seeing it inch closer and closer to the west coast of Florida. We are expecting an update from Governor Ron DeSantis on Hurricane Ian to come through at 7:30 a.m. Eastern time. But before that, we will get a complete update from the National Hurricane Center at 5 a.m. Eastern time. So in just about 15 minutes time, we'll have more information, live, raw, and unfiltered, to bring you on Hurricane Ian as we continue to track this system. We are going to step away for another quick 2-minute commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back into Live Now from Fox. Our coverage of Hurricane Ian continues right here on the show. We do know that this system is now 85 miles west-southwest of Naples, Florida. It is inching towards the west coast of Florida. We were expecting a direct hit in the Tampa Bay area, but the storm has shifted ever so slightly south and also east. And so it does appear that we're going to see a direct hit now closer to the Fort Myers area. But of course, a new update will come down from the National Hurricane Center at 5 a.m. and we'll bring that to you live, raw, and unfiltered here on the show. We do want to continue to touch in with our Fox 35 Tampa team. Our Fox 35 Orlando team, I should say, as this system is also expected to make its way inland in Florida and touch down here in the Orlando area. So I do want to send you out to their coverage. Let's listen in live, raw, and unfiltered here on Live Now from Fox.
It won't be there after the hurricane hits.
This time I think we're going to definitely be underwater, but there's nothing we can do. We can't hold the ocean back. It is what it is.
Well, as we have been telling you, a big concern for our area will be the flooding.
Yeah, we asked Jamie Rome from the National Hurricane Center what he thinks about Central Floridians, what they should know before Ian arrives.
We're at the end of the wet season or the rainy season here in Florida. The grounds are already saturated. You dump this kind of rain on it and then put strong winds through it. And then what you're looking at is a high potential for trees to be uprooted, fall down, take out power lines, block roads. Then the roads are going to be flooded by the heavy rains. I don't think people appreciate just how long they're going to need to stay put. So as you make your final preparations, think about what you need for the next several days, because this is not going to be in and out quickly. And even once it does pass, I'm not sure conditions are going to be safe for people to move about for quite some time.
You know, that gets your attention for sure. And I think just looking at the GFS model for the rain is stunning, as we're going to talk to Jamie and Allison about that.
Yeah, you've got the rain, you've got the flooding.
Yeah, I mean, with slow moving, let's get to them right now. I mean, we're talking about 21, 25 inches of rain. That is a massive amount of rain in a short amount of time.
Why, we were just back in the storm center here behind the scenes before we joined you here live. And the threats, Allison, are incredible with Ian here locally.
That's exactly right. The flooding, like we talked about, the rain, the gusty winds, as well as the threat for isolated tornadoes. So we'll be watching that for you very closely right here in the Fox 35 Storm Center.
All right, without further ado, let's give you the latest forecast track. We look for a new one to come here pretty soon, 5 a.m. Want to show you a major hurricane impacting southwest Florida. You can see the cone of uncertainty here, so either side, fair game, as we say. And then moving up into the Orlando metro as a very strong tropical storm right over the metro, in fact. So that is why we now are under a hurricane warning. Those came down yesterday, and really not shocking at the end of the day. You have to account for any possibilities, tropical storm force, and then some in regard to the winds. And as we look at it longer term, heading up into the deep southern states, so very impactful for a large geographical region of the southeast U.S. Watches warnings for you. We've got the tropical storm warned areas shaded in the orange. The red show a hurricane warning until further notice. With a look here at Fox 35 Storm Tracker radar. Alan, I've been watching a few of these rain bands have been rotating just south here as you head on down to the southern turnpike area, moving up and out of the Treasure Coast. Nothing alarming locally yet. We do have those some heavier downpours now heading out toward Mims and Southmere. You can see those migrating in off the northern side of the Indian River out toward Playa Linda Beach. What we call a stratiform rain. While it isn't super heavy, it isn't super light either. It's a soaker actually. So that's what we've got on top for you at this very moment. To take you up into Flagler, looking at Palm Coast, we've got some lighter stratiform rains there up toward Bimini, US 1 Bunnell, down to Mound Grove and into the National Gardens area along I-95, and then down in South Florida. We're watching these here in particular. You can see they got a little kind of a kidney bean shape to them, a little bit of rotation. Those are likely rotating now on the north side of Okeechobee, so Clewiston, Pahokee down the Belle Glade in the clear now, but everything you see there is now gradually rising northbound with time. So we talk about the tornadic risk. Let's outline that for you with our exclusive tornado tracker here in the Fox 35 Storm Center. It looks like we really upped the ante here with the potential by this Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. A lot of these cells are going to come racing as fast as 45 to 50 miles per hour in storm movement in these rain bands. So they'll be spinning, and it looks as though from Claremont on down the Poinciana and south of Melbourne up to Titusville and even up near Ocala, some of these rain bands could produce a few isolated tornadic spin-ups. So we've got our eyes on that for you. That'll continue as we go through the afternoon hours. After about lunchtime today, we'll see the winds rising at a very gradual process, and rain will begin to become rather heavy, more concentrated. As far as the storm surge is concerned, I want to take a look obviously down in the southwestern peninsula. Some big numbers coming in, over 15 feet possible in some of these areas out toward Fort Myers Beach. And as we look at Satellite Beach now, north of there through the Canaveral Bight and then back up toward Flagler County, the Indian River as well, there could be some sharp rises of water there at about 3 to 5 feet. So we talk about the storm surge, what we have going on, but we don't have a landfalling system in the Atlantic. We have much higher tides with a big push of onshore wind flow out of the easterly direction, east-northeast or east-southeast, depending on where you're located, and that is setting the stage for a sharp water rise, i.e. a storm surge of sorts over the eastern peninsula, not only, again, confined to the southwestern peninsula. For more on the Ian timeline, I'd like to bring in Allison Gargaro now in the Fox 35 Storm Center. Allie, take us through what our viewers can expect for today and beyond.
Well, Jamie, we want to let everybody know that you need to remain in your safe place starting at 10 o'clock this morning until we ride out this storm with you. We're going to be seeing an increase in downpours and potentially that tornadic threat, and it continues throughout the day. By around lunchtime, winds will start to rise, and we could be seeing some spotty flash flooding, and then the steady downpours do move in as we head into the evening hours, continuing throughout the day on Thursday. So by sunrise tomorrow, that's when those winds really picking up 55+ mile per hour gusts. Then as we head throughout the lunchtime, an increase in those winds, and the heavy rains do continue with the threat for that flooding. So let's take you into our future radar. You can see those outer rain bands going to be moving across not only the Orlando metro, our east coast, and up through north central Florida throughout the afternoon today. And then as we head into the evening hours, that's when that really heavy rain is going to be moving in as the center of circulation makes its way onshore and continues across much of the area. So you can expect those heavy rains to continue through at least the early morning hours on Friday. And I say at least because if Ian slows down even just a skosh, we're going to be seeing that really continue with that widespread of not only the winds, but also the rain. We are under a very likely 3 out of 5 risk for not only the chance for damaging wind gusts, but also that isolated tornado threat. And then as we head throughout the day on Thursday, we're also going to be seeing a likely risk centered in the counties shaded in yellow on your screen. But I do want to take you in to see just how much rain we could be seeing, several inches. We're talking 20+ inches in some locations. So we'll be watching that very closely for you today and tomorrow. Fox 35 storm alert days as we do see some of those Ian impacts. And Jamie, we just want to let all the viewers at home know that we are going to be right here in the Fox 35 Storm Center riding out this storm with you, and we'll be bringing you updates county by county. We really want to make sure that you and your family are staying safe as Ian is approaching the Florida Peninsula.
Good point on the county by county. Yeah, it's critical. Everyone knows what's coming their way, so we have a large viewing area when we've got everyone covered. We want all to depend on us here. Keeping you and your family members safe is our top priority. That's all for now. Allison, we'll go ahead and take it away with some Sky Fox traffic.
Well, good morning. We do continue to monitor a crash. Well, I want to let you know it actually just
back out to our X-Rad radar we go, where we continue to monitor Hurricane Ian as it does inch towards the Florida Peninsula there. You did just hear our Fox 35 team breaking down the latest on this system. We are expecting, obviously, not only a devastating storm surge, not only catastrophic winds that are currently at 120 miles per hour, but also tornadoes affecting many parts of Florida. So this is just one of the many layers that we will continue to follow and monitor here on the show. It is 4:54 on the East Coast. We're going to step away for a quick 2-minute commercial break. When we come back, we'll get you up to speed on all of the information, because at that time we'll be just a couple minutes shy of the latest update from the National Hurricane Center that we are expecting to come down at 5 a.m. Eastern time. So in just a matter of minutes, we will have an updated tally on where this hurricane currently is, what category it falls under, how fast it is moving, and where the new path will take it. So all of those details coming up right after this break. Welcome back into Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Gabrielle Amato, and we have officially received the latest update from the National Hurricane Center. We are just gathering that information for you live, raw, and unfiltered here on the show. We can report that Hurricane Ian is now officially a Category 4 hurricane. That is the latest information that has come down into our newsroom. Hurricane Ian strengthening to a Category 4 storm with winds now at 140 miles per hour. This was precisely what was anticipated. We did know that this storm, as it made its way past Cuba, back into the Gulf of Mexico, and ultimately towards Florida, that with the warm waters and the amount of high pressure that this system had, it was expected to strengthen. It has done just that. And as we anticipated, it is now inching towards the Florida coast as a Category 4 hurricane. We are going to continue to monitor this system as it does now have sustained winds at 140 miles per hour. To say that that is devastating would be an understatement. We have been monitoring, and that is why the people of Florida have been putting and getting ready for this system as it does inch closer. We do know that it is about 75 miles now from the coast of Naples, about 105 miles from Punta Gorda, Florida. Those maximum sustained winds now up to 140 miles per hour. It is moving at 10 miles per hour, so still moving very slowly, but those sustained winds are up, and we can report that that category is now up as well. So Hurricane Ian, now a Category 4 hurricane. We are going to dip in and out of our Fox 35 and Fox 13 Tampa coverage as the morning progresses, but we do want to bring for you some more details that are coming down and into our newsroom from the National Hurricane Center. We do want to bring you out to updated images that are coming into our newsroom, and this is what we do here on the show. As these updates come in, we bring them to you live, raw, and unfiltered here on the show. We do have images of the path and also some of those sustained winds, when those winds will begin to be felt, and key messages that the Hurricane Center are providing the people with. So I do want to bring up this image for you here that we have pulled up on the system, and we do want to read for you some of these key images that if you are tuning in from wherever you are tuning in, we do want to make sure that you're aware of this information. So life-threatening storm surge is expected along the Florida coast and the lower Florida Keys, where a storm surge warning is currently in effect. So this is once again one of the latest updates that we are providing for you. Our Fox 13 team are going to be on this story, and so we'll dip into their coverage as soon as they return. But once again, the breaking news of the hour is that Hurricane Ian is now a Category 4 storm. The winds are at 140 miles per hour, which does mean that it will approach the Florida coast now as a Category 4 hurricane. We do know that we're going to get an update from Governor Ron DeSantis, who's expected to speak at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Our Fox 35 team are actually on this story now. They are live with the latest details here, so I do want to send you out. Let's listen
Major
in.
Category 4 hurricane. So we're going to jump right in the track now. Let's update the fine folks here in Central Florida. Give you a look now. Looks like moving into Southwest Florida, winds at 140 on their Wednesday today at 2 o'clock, drawing closer to the shoreline. There's that strike into Thursday, 2 a.m. A very, very strong Category 1. Winds at 80 approaching Orlando there, and doesn't really look like it comes down in intensity till Thursday at 2 with winds at 60. So again, that's why we have hoisted an active now a hurricane warning for the Orlando Metro. That came in yesterday. That still holds firm right now. There's a track for a longer term, very impactful system all the way up into the spine of the southeastern states. Active and now continuing until further notice, hurricane warned areas for Leesburg area down the Claremont, that's Lake County, over to Seminole and Orange, into Osceola, Polk, and then areas to the south and back over to Tampa for good reason, as again we now have a Category 4 hurricane likely making landfall there in the southwestern peninsula. We also now have expanded the tornado watch into Seminole, Brevard, Orange, and Osceola County. You can see why as we see some rain bands now racing north. These are of concern to us right now. You can see a bit of a kidney beam hurricane shape to these, showing that rotation on Fox 35 Storm Tracker radar. Bigger view now shows us that a system coming a little bit closer to the shoreline. There's that eye. So intense, typically don't get lightning in these tropical systems, but Ian's so strong that it is producing lightning on the front side there, that eye wall. You can see really fired on up. Right now, South Florida, not in the clear entirely, but looking a lot better than we did earlier this morning. So a live track here shows the rain peppering on in here. That rainfall will continue to increase in duration, more frequency to that as we go deeper into the morning and into the afternoon hours. A look here up to the northern counties, out toward Palm Coast to Flagler and into the Bimini area. That's what we got for you right now. Let's talk about rain. Allison Gargaro joining me live now in the Storm Center with more on that. Allison, big time rain amounts with a big time storm.
That's exactly right. And flooding going to be a very big issue as we head throughout the next 48 hours. Let's take a look at future totals through 8 a.m. on Friday. We could be seeing up to 29 inches of rain in Claremont, 27 in Leesburg, 25 in DeLand, 21 in Daytona Beach, and about 17 in Orlando. You can see exactly where this storm is heading. Some of our northwestern viewing area, so that does include Cross City, Otter Creek, and Gainesville, could be seeing less than 4 inches. But the main rain and where we are going to be seeing a heightened risk for some flash flooding is going to be likely in Lake County across the gut of the Florida Peninsula here. Now, we do want to mention, with a saturated ground and the gusty winds that do come with a Category 4 storm and then likely decreasing, we actually could be seeing the downed trees, which do make roads impassable, as well as down power lines. You can see those outer rain bands making their way across the viewing area throughout the evening hours tonight. And then as that center of circulation makes its way across central Florida, we will continue to see that rainfall until at least early Friday morning. So, Jamie, this is something that we are watching, but the tornadic threat is really something we need to keep a close eye out for as we head into the next few hours.
Well, one of the good things in all this is that we have our exclusive tornado tracker. We'll have that for you coming up at 5:15 with a full look at the forecast, of course, tracking Ian for you this morning here on Good Day Orlando. Time now for our Skyfox traffic update with Allison Gargaro. Allie, let me update you right now.
Well, good morning, everyone. There are a few crashes that we were monitoring, but we didn't see many roadblocks. But I do want to mention that right now on I-75, we are up to speed. I do want to say, though, if folks are trying to get to their safe place, again, by 10 a.m., that is the time that we want to make sure that nobody is out on the roads anymore. We could be seeing some slow and go conditions, but other than that, things are up to speed. So as for now, we'll send it back to you.
And we will take it. Thank you so much. Ian's cone of uncertainty has now moved south of Tampa Bay.
It doesn't mean part of the West Coast is out of the woods by any stretch. And Fox 35's Dave Puglisi is in Tampa this morning with the Fox 35 Storm Team Thunder Truck. Dave, that area is still under a threat of some harsh winds and, of course, heavy rain.
Yeah, right. And right now we're starting to see the start of that rain. It's really nothing too crazy at the moment in time. But one of the things you can see, Tampa Bay, town, not a single.
Up the storefronts here, we are in evacuation zone A. We have a 6 p.m. evacuation mandate today, so we're doing our best to get everything ready.
That was Fox 35's Dave Puglisi reporting for us there. We'll get back to Gabe coming up here in just a little bit, but let's turn things over now to Fox 35's Amanda McKenzie. She continues our team coverage this morning. Amanda, good morning to you. The governor has announced the toll suspension is moving here into Central Florida. So what that means is that folks will not be charged, right, for using some of our toll roads.
That's right. So that should help move things along for folks who are evacuating. So they don't need to slow down or stop going through those toll checkpoints. They can just keep moving, and that should improve the flow of traffic. The governor and other officials have also said that some shoulder lanes on the interstate will also be open to help with the flow of traffic. Now I want to give you a live look right now. It is dark and things are moving very well here on I-4 through Orange County. We are currently driving in the eastbound lanes, but it is possible as the morning wears on that more people will be hitting the road because, as you just mentioned, the latest track for Hurricane Ian is a little more south of Sarasota, so we may be seeing more folks from the West Coast choosing to evacuate this morning. Now, I do want to bring your attention to the fact that yesterday when we were out here, there was a lot of traffic. It was shoulder to shoulder, bumper to bumper, and I spoke with several people evacuating from the Tampa Bay Bay area who tell me they struggled to find gas and a place to stay at the last minute.
Near SeaWorld, just hoping that was the only hotel. One of the hotels had 200 rooms and then 2 hours later had none. So it's been really hard to even find a hotel. 5 gas stations before I can get gas in Tampa.
The governor says several areas along the west coast could see catastrophic flooding and life-threatening storm surge. More than 2.5 million people are under some type of evacuation order right now. So if people didn't hit the road yesterday, we expect many more to do so today. So the governor is urging those folks to seek higher ground in a safe structure. Now we will continue to monitor the road conditions as thousands of people evacuate from the west coast. Reporting live from I-4, Amanda McKenzie, Fox 35 News.
And you know, Amanda, you talked about the flooding. Parts of our area could see a major dumping of rain. This as the storm moves over central Florida.
Yeah, even driving in this morning, you see water already ponding, and it's just starting. It's already canceled classes and opened up some of its schools and shelters in Lake County. And Randy Hildreth is live at the Circle K off Highway 448. And Randy, I know you were posting that a lot of these places are out of gas because so many people were topping off in the last few days.
Exactly right. Amanda was just talking to viewers about the situation that she was seeing. It's exactly what I'm seeing this morning. Smart planning with people topping off, getting gas for their generators, but it creates a situation like we're seeing here. When I arrived here in the parking lot, I could see that the gas nozzles were covered. You have a car parked, but again, they won't be able to get any gas because they don't have any available for the public here. I was told that they do have a reserve in place for law enforcement and emergency personnel to be able to get gas, but they are still waiting on a shipment to come in so that they can open these pumps up to the public. But that's the situation here in terms of gas. Now, in terms of conditions here, noticeably breezy, starting to see a little bit of rain come down, and rain is the big part of the conversation here in Lake County. You heard Allison talking about the amount of rain that some parts of this area could see. Claremont, upwards of 2 feet of rain, and so that is something certainly on the minds of people here. They are going to open some of the sandbagging locations and some of the shelters will open again, obviously again today, but they are opening some additional locations. I want you to take a look at your screen because these are some of the new locations that will open at 8 o'clock this morning. 11 already open, 4 more, including East Ridge Middle and High School, Eustis High School, and Tavares High School. Those are the new locations and shelters that you can go to this morning. And we talked about the rain. Some sandbag locations will also open again today. Those 6 locations that have been open this week, and a new location at the Lake County Fire Station, Fire Station 112 in Claremont, that will open today if you need to get bags. County officials say that since Monday, over 11,000 sandbags have been distributed to the community for people wanting to take those extra precautions. Now, coming up at 9:30 this morning, county officials, school officials will hold a news conference where they are expected to give more updates about the situation and the planning that they've done to prepare. Live this morning in Lake County, Randy Hildreth, Fox 35 News.
Very good information, Randy. Thank you. And Fox 35 will be working through every hour of Hurricane Ian to get you all of the vital information that you will need as fast as we possibly can. The Fox 35 Storm Team app is where you can track this storm on live radar, get the weather warnings as well. And if you ever lose power, you can still watch our newscast live on the Fox 35 News app.
Yeah, you've still got a few hours to get things, whether it's draining the pool, getting things tucked away outside. Do that in the next few hours.
Very important indeed. And our team coverage continues coming up here after the break.
We're going to take you back to a gas.
And we are going to continue to monitor this system along with our Fox 35 Orlando team and also our Fox Tampa team as well. Although this storm, as you have been hearing, has shifted slightly. It is now aiming towards the Sarasota-Fort Myers area and not so much a direct hit for Tampa, Florida. So we are going to continue to track this system as it does inch closer towards the Florida coast. We do know, obviously, the latest update, as you can see there on your screens, Hurricane Ian now a Category 4 hurricane with winds at 140 miles per hour. The latest update that has come down from the National Hurricane Center does put this storm at about 75 miles west-southwest of Naples, Florida. So we are inching closer and closer to the Florida west coast. Ian is moving closer and is expected to cause not only life-threatening storm surge, expected to be at around 10 feet in the worst areas, but also catastrophic winds and flooding in the Florida peninsula. Flooding that could also obviously impact central Florida, which is why we're going to be tuning into our Fox 35 team, because they are also very much in the path of this system and are going to experience not only severe flooding, but also those catastrophic winds, in addition to tornadoes that we're going to be monitoring throughout the day as well. So this is the latest on Hurricane Ian. It is 5:12 here on the East Coast. We're going to step away for a quick 2-minute commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back into Live Now from Fox. Our coverage of Hurricane Ian continues. The latest news into our newsroom. It is now a Category 4 hurricane with winds at 140 miles per hour. We do know that it is moving at 10 miles per hour. It's come but just in about 75 miles west-southwest of Naples, Florida, with those maximum sustained winds at 140 miles per hour. Just an hour ago, those winds were at 120 miles per hour. So just for context, and just how rapidly this storm is intensifying. Now, this was part of the plan. It is what the National Hurricane Center expected this storm to do as it touched down in Cuba just yesterday as a Category 3. It made its way back into the Gulf of Mexico with those warm waters, with the high pressure. It did gain intensity once again and is now a Category 4 hurricane. Our Fox 35 team are on the ground tracking this system for us, and I do want to send you out live, raw, and unfiltered to their coverage. Now, let's listen in.
Storm Center, Al, and boy, some large developments with this now. A Category 4 winds at 140 miles per hour on Ian.
And the wind field is expanding so far, and Jamie's going to go into detail on that. But not only can you expect very gusty winds here, but a lot of rain. So
tremendous
flooding is going to be a very big issue.
Allison, the GFS forecast model in particular generating over 2 feet in some locations in Central Florida. So we are concerned about flash flooding, obviously, with the heavy rains moving in, and the fact that we've got a Cat 4 hurricane here on this Wednesday at 2. Winds holding steady at 140, and it looks like a strike here on the southwestern side of the peninsula. Anywhere within the cone, again, you've got your western envelope of the cone, the eastern side of the envelope, and riding right on up. On approach to Orlando, while decreasing, it may very well still have Category 1 intensity and diminishing quickly back down the tropical storm status. But don't let that fool you, friends. The impacts are going to be absolutely enormous for the area. And you can see that rides right on up into the southern states. Big impacts, multiple states likely as we get into the weekend. Florida not only in this fray, it's going to be a handful of states now. So we look up at Gainesville to Gilchrist County. We've got active tropical storm watches there. The orange indicates warnings now for tropical storm. The red hurricane warned areas now for areas of Lake County, the whole county there into Seminole, orange down the Osceola into Polk, over to Tampa, and then down toward Okeechobee. So pretty big, broad area is going to get a big boost in the winds, and we anticipate that canopy of heavy winds to arrive generally after about lunchtime. It'll be a gradual baby step process. If you're a seasoned storm veteran, you know how that process plays out. It isn't boom and it's the onset and here we go. It's a gradual ramp up, conditions gradually going downhill as we go through the day today. So as we look at 5 a.m., see the impactful winds overspreading. There's that canopy of tropical storm force moving in by 5 o'clock today. So there's that boost after lunchtime. And then as we see landfall and it moves across the state, we start to see some of these real impactful winds getting in here. Again, a category 1 by that time, right on top of the metro. Perhaps a little bit weaker, really depends on what's going on with the structure of the storm during that time. But we've been advising you to prepare for hurricane force winds in the Orlando metro because we are now under a hurricane warning. That went into effect yesterday. And then that continues riding along, and that wind overspreads Volusia County, Brevard County. So everyone gets a taste of this system as it moves on through. Another thing that we saw this morning is the uptick in severe weather potential to a level 3, very likely for the potential for some tornadic wrap-ups here as the rain bands move in, and the strong damaging winds as well. And by tomorrow, we continue to see the potential for some more of that severe potential here, back down to a level 2, but still quite elevated. So for more on the Fox 35 Storm Tracker radar, Allison Gargaro joins me now live in the Storm Center. Allie, we're watching for the risk now of rotating cells within these rain bands. We saw it down in South Florida, and now we're under an active tornado watch for the metro.
That's exactly right. That just happened as of 5 o'clock this morning, so about 19 minutes ago. Not only in Orange County, but Seminole, Brevard, and Osceola going to be seeing that active tornado watch until at least 5 p.m. tonight. So we do want to take you in to our Fox 35 Storm Tracker radar right now. There's some moderate to heavy rain that's slowly moving up closer and closer to the Orlando metro and along our east coast. I do want to mention lightning not going to be a big threat here. It is going to be the very heavy and very steady rain. Let's take a look at that center of circulation of Ian. You can see it churning, and those outer rain bands keep moving across the Florida Peninsula. You can see just how far out that rain is spreading, so closer into our viewing area. You can see some moderate to heavy rain that's going to be falling in Brevard County right now, right along that I-75 corridor. That's near Titusville up toward Daytona Beach as well as Palm Coast. We're going to be seeing this rain continue. Now, do want to mention it's stratiform across most of the viewing area. Not too heavy, not too light, but it's steady. But some of that heavier rain really going to be moving in. You can see it offshore of Playa Linda Beach there and moving toward our immediate east coast. And up in Flagler County, we were seeing some moderate to heavy rain there, but really just a few cells that are moving onshore and zero lightning strikes. But I want to take you out to our tornado tracker. You're only going to find this right here on Fox 35. It's going to be showing the potential increase for any of those kidney beans that we see, where we actually could be seeing some of that rotation. So the reds and dark blues on your screen going to be showing the highest threat, and it's really increasing throughout the morning, 10 o'clock on Wednesday, and we'll see that continue as that center of circulation does start to make its way onshore. And if we continue through, you can actually see some of that heightened risk for those isolated tornadoes. So this is something that we will be watching for you. Again, no active tornado warnings right now, but that is something that we definitely could be seeing, and we will be tracking for you right here in the Fox 35 Storm Center.
Right, and the way that our exclusive tornado tracker is working now, that in itself is of concern, but we always advise everyone to let them know that we're here for you to protect you and your families, and I want all to depend on us here in the Fox 35 Storm Center. We're with you now.
Yep.
We're into a couple hours of our 12-hour haul here, and we're fully staffed with meteorologists around the clock, so I want all of you to be here at Fox 35 for the very latest intel on Hurricane Ian, a Category 4 hurricane out with winds at 140 miles per hour.
Just in at 5.
Yes. All right, time for some Sky Fox traffic.
That's
Allison.
exactly right. Do want to take you out to the Orlando Metro. Only one crash that I'm monitoring. This is going to be just north of the Orlando International Airport. So if you live near there, maybe you were planning on getting some gas this morning. Well, I do want to mention it. That crash is going to be at Shadow Ridge Drive at Judge Road. So we'll be continuing to monitor conditions across the Orlando Metro for you. But I do want to save you some money with our Fox 35 Pump Patrol. Gas $3.25 rather at the 7-Eleven on South Orange Blossom Trail. That is near West Gore Street in Orlando. And to compare gas prices where you live, just head to our website, fox35orlando.com. We'll send it back to you.
Allie, thank you so much. We do invite you to keep it right here with us on Fox 35 because we will continue our coverage of Hurricane Ian for you, really, not just all morning.
And thank you to our Fox 35 Orlando team for their continued coverage of Hurricane Ian. That is now a Category 4 storm with winds at 140 miles per hour. We also are tuning in live, raw, and unfiltered to our Fox 13 team as the Fox 13 Tampa area was actually bracing for a potential direct hit. Now, we did just get an update from the National Hurricane Center, the 5 a.m. update, which actually puts this storm heading more south and also slightly more east. So not a direct hit for the Tampa area anymore, but now a more direct hit for the Fort Myers, Sarasota, Cape Coral area. That is the latest information coming into our newsroom that puts this storm at 75 miles now, actually west-southwest of Naples, Florida, with those maximum sustained winds at 140 miles per hour. We did expect this to happen just earlier this morning. The 2 a.m. update and also the 4 a.m. update had this storm as a Category 3. Now, we were anticipating it to strengthen because of the high pressure systems that were surrounding the storm, also because of that warm water in the Gulf of Mexico. And so as planned and as expected, it has strengthened officially to a Category 4 storm with those sustained winds at 140 miles per hour. Now, we're monitoring quite a few weather warnings. We do have tornado warnings and watches across the state of Florida that as they come into our newsroom, we'll be sure to bring those to you live, raw, and unfiltered, just in case you are tuning in from one of those areas. We also do have our reporters stationed around the state that we'll be touching base with, courtesy of our Fox 35 and Fox 13 Tampa coverage. So more information will continue to come at you as it is made available to us here on the show. 5:24 here on the East Coast. We're going to step away for another quick 2-minute commercial break. We will be right back.